Hey everybody, I'm Josh. Now you think the title, beating the crap out of addiction, mental illness, suffering, yeah, it's just a catchy little thing, and that's not possible. I've been fighting this my whole life and hasn't worked. How's that possible? Well, I want to start by saying there's a thing called a long-term study, a bunch of long-term studies called the happiness curve. And the happiness curve, it studied the happiness levels of people at different ages over a long period of time. And it showed at about the age of 18, your happiness level is pretty high. And then it just slopes down, keeps sloping down and sloping down and sloping down until it bottoms out at the lowest possible. And it's usually late 30s, 40s, early 50s when it's bottoming out. And it just kind of stays along there. And it's that's rock bottom. Now this is on average, so everybody's life is different, obviously. There's always exceptions to every rule. Then after it bottoms out, it does something amazing. It shoots way up to the highest it's ever been. And it keeps going and going way past the happiness level in the age of the teens, way past all of that. And it stays up there. It stays up there. And really, even until your late 70s, it doesn't even start to kind of level out a little bit, but then it's still higher than it was when you were a teenager. I always thought when I first had my spiritual rebirth, this was because people found God at that age. It takes a good amount of suffering, a good amount of experience and wisdom, and then you finally find God. But then I saw another study, and it said that most people don't have any kind of spiritual experience. Only about 5% of people. I don't know how, I haven't looked at a bunch of studies on that, but it's about 5%, I think. And even less than that have a full-on spiritual awakening where they find themselves, they find God. So I was thinking, well, it can't be because they find God, because if only 5%, that's not going to bring the average up way that high. But I started thinking about it, and I think I was right the first time. And I realized that people at the age of anywhere from your 40s to 50s, to even into the 60s, finally understand themselves. They're finally knowing themselves for the first time. They've been living in this world, in this weird, strange world, in this weird, strange body, with all these flaws and all these intricacies, and finally they know themselves. And knowing yourself, whether you understand it or not, is knowing God. Now, you might not have that same relationship that someone who has had a spiritual awakening or has experienced God firsthand, has a personal relationship with them. But you know your soul. You're starting to understand your soul. And understanding your soul is knowing. I believe our souls are divine beings. They're not God, but they are, in essence, a piece of God, connected to God. And they're more connected to God than I understand. Everything is a piece of God, because God created everything, so everything's a piece of Him. But this is the consciousness of God. There's probably so many layers of God that we just we can't comprehend it, but you're connected to the consciousness of God and your spirit. My friend and I were talking last night, and I was kind of explaining it, and this is how I feel about it. We are just basically an avatar in a video game. our soul is the main controller. So our soul would be us playing the video game. Our bodies and our brains have an autopilot mode, kind of. So since I'm not much of a gamer, and you'll have to excuse the bugs are flying all around me, so I'm not much of a gamer, so I kind of related it to Mario Brothers, because that was, when I was still playing video games every now and then. So you're playing Mario, and the autopilot mode has some, it can beat some levels, it can do some things, but have you ever been playing a video game and you just, all of a sudden something clicked and you're just in a flow? Like when you're playing Mario and for so long you're looking at the jump, you're lining up that jump, and you're trying to get it right, and you're trying to learn the levels, and you're trying to do everything, and all of a sudden you're just flying through it like it's second nature to you. Like you are one with Mario then. You are just flying through, and it feels free, like you haven't even taken your fingers off the controls. It's almost like your fingers have become the controllers. Like you have become one. This is what it means to discover ourselves. This is what it means to discover our souls. If we can get to this point, it helps us so much in the game. It helps us so much. Because we're just, clinky and jerking around and trying to do our best to avoid all the things that life throws at us, all the turtles with spikes on it and turtles with wings and all whatever else the drug-addled minds of the creators of Mario could think of. So we're trying to just avoid all that in our real lives. And when you discover yourself, when you have, I guess we'll call it a spiritual awakening, you discover yourself and you have finally gotten into that flow state. All of a sudden, everything just seems like it's smooth and graceful. You're flying through. Yeah, you'll have struggles. Even when you get to that flow state in Mario or whatever game you're playing, you're still going to have challenges, and you're still going to fall down the canyons or get hit by a fireball or whatever. But it happens less and less and less, because you are becoming one with not only Mario, but soon you're becoming one with the game itself. The more and more you play it, the more you master it, the easier it is. And the less you have to think about it, the less you force things. You're not forcing things anymore when you're in that flow state. You're just doing, not forcing. But in life, God gives us all the tools that we need. And now you say, well, I haven't gotten what I need. Other people get what they need, but not me. Think of it like this. So you have a child who has no guidance or anything, and you give them a hammer, or somebody gives them a hammer, or they just find a hammer. Let's just say they're alone in the world and they find a hammer. They don't know what to do with it. So chances are some windows are going to be busted out, and some fingers are going to be smashed, and all kinds of stuff. And most likely, after that happens, they're probably going to be putting that hammer down until something, maybe they find nails. But when they find nails, they're not going to put two and two together. They're going to be like, well, probably draw some blood, honestly, if you're a child and you find some nails. And you're like, well, okay, I found these spiky things and they don't do me any good either, so they just leave them behind. Then they find some wood. And then maybe it starts to click for them. And then they're like, maybe I use those nails and that hammer and piece that wood together and build something. It takes so long for them to grasp this because nobody's showing them. Until somebody teaches us what things are for, we don't understand. So finally, they're putting the pieces together like a puzzle, and then they realize they can put this nail in this wood and hammer it down and build something awesome. And it's not going to be awesome the first few times, and there's going to be more smashed fingers and probably more blood drawn, and that might discourage them from using the stuff at all, and maybe like, well, maybe that wasn't a good idea. You know, I learned my lesson with the hammer and the spiky things, and now I learned my lesson with this. But he gives us these tools, and we don't know how to use them until we figure it out, until we get to that flow state, self-discovery. But we are battling the unseen. And that's the trouble. Since we can't see it or sense it with our five senses, we don't understand it. It's just like God. We can't sense him with our five senses, so we don't know how to have a relationship with him. That is addiction, that is mental illness, that is suffering in every single form, trauma. So, how do we fight against the unseen? And why? First of all, if you're playing a game of Mario, you know, this Mario is going to be my analogy in this one. If you're playing a game and something unseen keeps knocking you out of the game over and over and over again, knocking you on your ass, then you're going to get discouraged because you can't see them. How are you supposed to beat a level when something completely unseen keeps coming at you? It is the eternal question. You know, people believe in addiction, people believe in mental illness, people believe in all these things, but we can't physically sense them. We can't physically see them. A lot of these concepts of struggling are something that we can't even grasp at all. But we ask, again, I ask, how do we fight against the unseen? What do we do when that unknown, unseen thing keeps knocking us on our ass over and over and over again, and we just get discouraged and just give up because we're only human? What can we do? We need to build a strategy. These bugs, I love it in the summer when the heat comes and the bugs come out. But we need to be a blind warrior, a badass blind warrior. And something like, I mentioned it in the last video I did on addiction, something like when Daredevil in the comic books lost his sight, all of a sudden the other senses kicked in. Or, okay, so what do you do then when you lose your senses? One of your senses is gone, your other senses pick up the slack. That's just what happens. Why? Because you're focusing more on those senses. You're focusing more on feel. If you're blind, you're focusing more on feel and smell and touch and hearing. But what if we have lost all those senses? None of those senses really give us any sort of help in a fight against the unseen and the unknown. So what do we do? How do we fight that? We have to awaken something called the sixth sense, or the third eye, they say it's in the pineal gland in the brain is where this sense of, it controls our dreams. It produces a sort of psychedelic type chemical called diethyltryptamine, I think it's called, DMT. It produces that naturally in our brains. For what reason, nobody still knows. But when we finally have this sixth sense focused, then we are badass blind and scentless and touchless and deaf, dumb, and blind, I guess is what they used to call it. It's probably offensive now. But we are fighting on pure instinct and pure flow state, really. It's not even instinct, because instincts are more reliant on our five senses. So it's flow state. Now, you can actually access your sixth sense in different ways, and some of them are healthy, some of them are not. You can do things like meditation, like transcendental meditation. It'll get you, or maybe an isolation tank, that thing where you lay in like the salt water and it's completely dark and quiet, and you're just alone in there. And some people freak out. You can also do it through psychedelics. Opens up whatever channels something unknown, like the spiritual realm. But the problem with that is when you channel that spiritual realm, you are channeling things that are positive, and you're also allowing things that are negative to come in. So let's say you're bipolar or schizophrenic, and you go into an isolation tank, or even worse, taking a psychedelic. Your mind will be just screaming at you, because it is picking up all kinds of stuff more than normal. And you're like, why? Because if you're in an isolation tank and it's picking up more than normal, what is going on here? You're channeling the things that exist on that spiritual level, which are spirituality, which is a good thing most of the time, and also delusion, which is a bad thing. So it's light and dark that exists there, and there's not one without the other, just like in this world. The only place that exists without each other is most likely the divine realm. So we open up this sixth sense, though. We do it in any way that we can. But to do it when you have some sort of mental illness or something that is going to allow more darkness in than light, then you have to find a way to keep your feet firmly planted in the ground. Now, I've seen people do psychedelics at the age of, in their teens and 20s, and I've seen people do them in their middle ages. And it helps so much more for the people who are in their middle ages. The reason for that is they've learned more about life. They've learned how to keep themselves grounded in life. That is absolutely necessary when channeling your sixth sense, your third eye. Because if you do not, you will be swept away in some current of madness. It might look like something divine, it might look like something beautiful, and then you go for it. You're swimming through the clouds of the spirituality, and all of a sudden you're in hell, because things are not what they seem. They're not ever what they seem. We have to go into Sun Tzu's Art of War, because we're going to build a strategy for fighting this unknown enemy, this unseen enemy at least. You know who they are. You know you've been getting your ass kicked by addiction for so long. You've been getting your ass kicked by mental illness or whatever kind of suffering you're trying to deal with. So we know what they are. That's the first step. We want to learn everything that we can about them. So Sun Tzu, he lays out 13 main strategies of how to conduct war. And now this is for all of life. This isn't just for battle, because our life is a battle, or it's however you want to perceive it. It might be a battle of peace. It might be a battle of violence. It's whatever you make it. It's still a battle of light versus dark. And if you don't fight against the darkness, the darkness is going to win easily. Because you're going to lay down and just surrender, or just flip that switch off. Say, I'm done being beat up by this unseen thing in Mario. My Mario is beaten and broken, and I'm done with this game. It's not worth it. Flip that switch. Press that little power button. But you don't want to do this. This is a fight that is too important. So instead of approaching it like you always have, like, well, I really want to quit drinking or smoking meth or doing meth or whatever I'm doing that is helping me escape this world, because that's what we're doing. That's what happens. We invite all of these things. Think of it as hiring mercenaries. So we hire mercenaries not to fight the war for us. We hire mercenaries to come and heal us. Come and help us forget about the war for a little while. And it is like a Trojan horse. Now, in Greek mythology, the Trojan horse was the Greeks were fighting the Trojans, and the Trojans had a big fortress, and the Greeks could not penetrate it. So what the Greeks did was they built a big wooden horse, a humongous wooden horse that was a decorative, beautiful thing. And they rolled it to the gates as a gift for the Trojans. The Trojans are like, oh, that's beautiful, let it in. Well, inside that horse, there were soldiers waiting. What they did was they waited till everyone was asleep, and they snuck out and they opened the gates. And then the other Greeks had sailed in under the cover of night, and they came in and just devastated the Trojans and ended the Trojan War, because they caught them all off guard while they were sleeping, got into their fortress. There was nothing they could do about it. Those mercenaries that we invite in, alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever, they are the Trojan horse. They're getting into your life, and we invite them in, and they look so beautiful, and they're so pretty to look at, and they're so nice for just little bits at a time. And then when we're not paying attention, when our guard's down, when we're half drunk or high or whatever, they sneak off and they open that gate, and they let in all the other demons. They let in that fear, that anxiety, that guilt and shame. They let it all in. And they just come. They sneak in too, because they want to make sure that they just completely overwhelm you before they attack. And they'll attack little bits at a time. Come in and just make your life difficult and make your life miserable. And so we're letting all these things in as we do the drugs and the alcohol or whatever it is we're doing to escape our suffering. Now, Sun Tzu says that we must know our enemy, know everything we can about our enemy, but we also must know ourselves. So that if we really know one or the other, we're going to win a battle here and there, but we're going to lose 10. We're going to take, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back every time. So we really have to know our enemy. And the fact that they sneak in the cover of darkness tells us a lot about that enemy. So if you're an alcoholic and you have a certain person, place, or thing that triggers your need to drink, then you know that enemy. And you're also knowing yourself, because you know how you respond to that enemy. And you're building on that. And you're building and you're building. And you're taking every trigger, every bit of information you can. And you're assessing it. And you're building different strategies. You're filling up your time. You're putting yourself in situations where you can succeed and you're not going to keep failing the way you did. And the thing is, you're going to get discouraged again because you have just finally even understood how to fight this battle and this war. But you were just laying down and getting trashed before. So now you're fighting back. You're gonna get beat plenty of times. But guess what? Every time that you lose is going to be a lesson. And you're going to know your enemy even better. You're going to know, well, I can't go do crossword puzzles or climb trees to take my mind off of drinking. So we'll find something else. Whatever you're into that's healthy, that can get those natural endorphins and that dopamine going, that is something you're going to try. I told my friend, and I mentioned it in the last video too, to deal with my suffering, and what helped me a lot, I went out and started collecting gems and rocks and minerals. And the reason that worked so great for me was it gave me fulfillment. So every time I went out and I found something, I was like, wow, this is great. What a beautiful rock. It gave me something tangible from the activity. So I was going out into the woods like I loved. I was finding sometimes beautiful gems, and I was getting exercise, which stimulated the natural endorphins and dopamine. And those are the soldiers that you want on your side. Now, ultimately, I'm telling you this, you have to understand that I am leaving out the greatest ally that you can possibly employ in this. And the reason I'm doing that is because I understand that most people are not connected to God, and that 95% plus of people haven't had a spiritual experience ever, or might not ever. So if you haven't found God, that is your biggest ally. Because the weakness of almost all your unseen enemies is direct light. So sunlight is going to kill that fear. So say you have a fear of going out into public because being around people. You shine the light on it by going out and being around people. And you keep going and going and going and putting yourself into those situations even though you're uncomfortable, and you keep doing it and doing it. You're going to get familiar with it. You're going to not care as much as you used to because you do it on a regular basis now. As I said in my last video, go to the library. You're going to be around people, but you're not going to have to deal with people, and it's going to be quiet and manageable, as opposed to trying to go to an amusement park or something else like right away. You work up to those things. Direct sunlight. With God, it is divine light. God's like the atomic bomb for all these fears and anxieties and struggles. But you have to actually understand him. And since you don't believe in him, but yet you believe in these unseen things that keep knocking you off your game and knocking Mario on his ass, blooding Mario's nose, and you believe in all those, but you might not believe in God. Or maybe you believe in God, you just don't know how to find him. Well, you don't have to find him to ask him, to put your faith in him. The stronger your faith in God, it's like an armor made of pure light, pure divine light. And yes, that light can fade if your faith fades. So the weaker your faith, the less that armor will work for you. But the more your faith shines, the brighter your armor shines. The more radiant, and it just cuts right through those fears and those anxieties and those struggles. I've told you all many times, I've been in pain, and I've had even that kind of feeling of hopelessness, I just said it the other day, but I have not struggled once, comparatively, at least, I guess. I've had pain, I've had plenty of it, but I've not struggled once since I found God. Because pain is the physical reaction to something negative that happens to our body. But struggling is our kind of spiritual and our judgment of that, how our brain thinks it should react to that type of thing. So if our brain thinks things are hopeless and there is no hope, like I was feeling hopeless the other day, if I wouldn't have had God, I would have easily folded. You must be someone who builds strategies upon strategies upon strategies and backups upon backups upon backups. Your enemy is smart, but it is not smarter than you. You might have told yourself it is, but you really are your own enemy in most cases. So you feel that manic depression like I was feeling the other day. And if I wouldn't have had God, I would have forced myself to go out like I was doing before my spiritual rebirth. Go out into the woods. Go looking for gems or go looking for edible plants or mushrooms or whatever I was going to do that day. I would have forced myself because I just told myself I have to do this. It's the only thing that even remotely makes me feel better. It gives me a purpose. I'm going out and looking for these rocks, these garnets and tourmaline and kyanite and stuff. It gives you a little fulfillment when you find them. When you don't, it's not the end of the world, but you're learning that area. You're like, okay, I went to this area, there was nothing. I'm not going back there. I'm going to search another area. So you go swimming, you play tennis, you do whatever you can do, and you find multiple things, not just, I'm talking as many things as you can possibly think of that you could do in your area that you can turn to and just take your mind off of. Something for rainy days, something for sunny days, something for cold days, something for hot days, something all the time for every situation. And you're not going to be anywhere near perfect in the beginning. You're going to get your ass kicked, but every time you get your ass kicked, you're going to learn. And then when you do have even a little minor victory, let's say I found something that kept me from drinking that day, it is going to feel like the greatest thing ever. And you're going to build off of that because it's going to give you hope. And hope comes straight from God. And as I said, God is the greatest ally. But he gives you that hope even when you don't know him. Because he's showing you can do things yourself. You can. You might not have ultimate victory without finding God, but you can get pretty damn far. You need to try everything. It is worth your time. Don't just say, I already tried going out and swimming, and when I felt like drinking, and I just felt like drinking more when I got home, so I just drank. So I'm just not going to do anything anymore. It just didn't work. If you want to give up on yourself like that, that's fine. I don't think you should. I think your life is worth more than that. But if you think that your life is really that worthless and you're just not going to do it, there's nothing anybody can do to stop you. You're the only one who can decide for yourself whether you're going to help yourself. You're the only one who can decide what works and what doesn't. Don't let anyone tell you may look like an idiot going and doing something that you think is fun or fulfilling to take your mind off of things, who cares? It does not matter what any of them think. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks except for you. Except for what is working for you. If that's saving your life, then let them laugh. I let people laugh at me because I laugh at myself all the time, and I think my flaws are pretty damn hilarious. And when you know your flaws, that's part of knowing yourself. You know your flaws, you know your strengths, you know your enemy's strengths and weaknesses. So you can anticipate that unknown enemy who keeps killing you in Mario. And you might not be able to see them, but you know now, hey, when I do this, that punch goes right to my face. So I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to do it in a different way, or I'm going to try a different path. And you're going to get your timing, you're going to get your strategy down. It's going to be so sloppy and so probably just bad to begin with, unless you're very good at this, and then good for you. I know for most people it's going to take a long time, and patience is one thing that we're all seem to be lacking nowadays. But you need to become that that badass blind warrior, senseless warrior. It's the fight for your life. It really is. You can channel that freedom. The last story I'll tell real quick is, how do you think that we won the American Revolution? George Washington and our troops were vastly outnumbered, vastly outgunned. It looked like it would have just been a walk in the park for the British. But it was divine providence. And I don't just mean how in Valley Forge and so many other times, it seemed like God changed the weather so it would benefit our soldiers. In Valley Forge, we had to cross the river in, I think, Trenton, and it was almost impossible. But this fog and this cold came along and covered our soldiers. And it happened so many times in so many different areas. I know the Battle of 1812 was the same thing. We were still fighting the British, and they were pushing their way to attack and just take back over the colonies at the time. At the time, it was already the United States, I guess, but they got past Baltimore and they just destroyed us, and they went to D.C. and they ransacked D.C. and then they went back into Baltimore and they got their asses kicked because this huge storm came in. This massive gale force wind came out of nowhere and just threw them all off and sent them packing back to Baltimore, where they got their asses kicked. It was divine providence also because we wanted freedom. Men wanted freedom. Yes, they were flawed people. Yes, they had slaves back then. And yes, it was awful. All times are awful in the past if you look at them and you judge them. I'm not saying that. I'm saying men who want freedom and men who have hope are much stronger than men are fighting for, or enemies that are fighting for nothing. And you can overtake anyone if you have that hope and that divine providence. You will stumble and fall, but as long as you draw breath, hope remains. All right, God bless. I'm going to do a few more videos on this whenever. I'm trying to get to as many comments as I can, but I've been a little under the weather lately. But you let me know what you think about this. You let me know what has worked for you or what hasn't worked for you. And I'm going to revise this strategy over and over and over again for as many people as it'll help. Love y'all.